I already forgot the first rule, which is talking to the microphone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Having the early morning session on Friday, you never know who's going to show up, so I'm glad to see so many interested folks here, so thank you for joining me. My name is Ivan Ceballos. I'm the Director of Residential Life at the University of Miami.
And I'm Tiffani Idle. I'm an Assistant Director in Residential Life at the University of Miami. All right, so kind of to start us off, we're going to share with you a little bit of our session outcomes. So as you saw, the title is Wanna Fight? Neither Do I, Understanding and Influencing the Outcomes of a Healthy Roommate Relationship. And so looking at our session outcomes, what we're going to do this morning is aim to describe the common effects students experience when involved in a negative roommate relationship, which we can probably assume some of those, but we've got some literature on that. Identify strategies for proactively educating residents on how to establish healthy roommate relationships and engage in effective conflict resolution techniques, and then discuss best practices and policies used to de-escalate conflict once it's occurred and restore a healthy roommate relationship. So,
perhaps it'll be helpful to provide a little insight as to why we put forward some work and why we decided to submit this as a presentation. During my time at the University of Miami, as the years have gone on, I've noticed that roommate conflict has becoming increasingly complex, longer as far as time needed to resolve it, more people involved, more parents involved. The days of she's blow drying her hair at 6 a.m. have slowly dissipated and the matters are becoming more complex. By show of hands, are these sentiments the same in your institute? Oh, okay. So it's not just us. So good for you. During this session, you will learn how to fix this and roommate conflicts will be no more. Just kidding. So Tiffani expressed an interest in doing something about this and spearheading this as part of a committee and summer project. At the same time, in my own experience in doctoral coursework, I decided to write a paper about roommate relationships and what happens when they don't go well. So I'm going to cite some literature in a little bit to discuss it. As we were discussing this and what could we do as an institution to address roommate issues, this happened. Does anyone know where this is? This is Duke University. I claim no affiliation with Duke. Never been, never worked there. Neither has Tiffani. This time last year, it was early March of 2018. This made its way not just in the Chronicle and Inside Higher Ed, our typical news avenues, but this also made its way in the national news cycle when Duke University announced we will no longer allow incoming students to choose their roommates. Did folks hear about this? Okay. This became big. Again, this made its way onto CNN and other national news outlets. And really, there were two reactions to this. There was, this is great, good for them. College should be about learning, meeting new people. And there was the, how dare they? Don't they know how much I'm paying? I should not be denied this opportunity. So for us, and especially the timing of this created a wonderful opportunity to use this as a training tool in a case study. And we thought we would use this opportunity briefly to discuss this. So envision yourself at this institution or at your own. And I'm curious, does anyone's institution have this as a policy? Okay, all right, so we have one. Talk to us about, and you will have to use a microphone, why would you implement this policy? What was your motivation, and perhaps even how did you go about successfully doing so?
I've been at the institution for about 2 years, and the reason that we do it is because we found that our students it's such a small population, we're about 2,700 students, that if they roomed with their friends, they would never have any friendships outside of those people. Coming from a larger institution, my supervisor learned that very quickly when an entire floor of boys all came from high school together, and one of them came to her office and basically said, I feel like I'm in high school again. I've had no other experiences except for the guys I grew up with. I want this different experience. So when she got to the institution, I don't know if she implemented it or not, but I know it's definitely been in place since I've been there. And we have the occasional fight back on it, but our response is always, we want you to get out, build a community, and you can live with your friends your sophomore, your junior, your senior year, because it's a 4-year on-campus requirement. But your freshman year, we want you to have that experience that's going to be non-traditional, that you're going to actually have to get out of your comfort zone and build community.
Thank you for sharing that. I think what you mentioned is my key takeaway for you. If there's one thing I hope you take away, is that you are in control of the expectations that you set for incoming students. Whether that is in the matter of a policy, such as you will not be able to select, or expectations related to how we will respond to roommate issues. That is up to you. And that will come with some tough decisions, but setting the expectations is the most important part as far as educating students and responding to roommate issues. Which leads me to my next question. What activities do you do, practices do you do that prepare students to engage in healthy roommate relationships or address roommate relationship issues? What are you currently doing?
So we've introduced a roommate agreement because a lot of the conversations that we have issues with are things that if they spoke about it up front, they typically would not happen. A big thing in my building is we fight over the temperature of the room because it's either hot or cold. There's really no in between. And so something that from the very first day they sit down together of when do we have visitors over, when is study time, sleep time, and typically when we have to go back through those conflicts, we pull out that contract again and say, here's where y'all discussed, until 5 p.m. it's study time, and after that her boyfriend's allowed to come over. She can hang out and turn up the TV if she wants to and things like that. And so having those conversations up front really helps set that standard of learning to communicate with each other, so that the next time we talk about it, it's not the first time I'm expressing the fact that I can't stand something that you do.
That's really good. Establishing some sort of agreement or conversation during the honeymoon phase at the beginning of the academic year will pay dividends on the tail end when issues arise, because at least you can refer back to, we discussed this, here's what you agreed to. Any other comments before we move on? So a little bit of
So a little bit of kind of going further into a rationale of why this was relevant for Ivan and I to kind of tackle is that 90% of our students who live on campus have roommates. So even our upperclassmen students, they're in suite style spaces, but they're sharing a room with somebody else. So it's common to have a roommate to begin with. And then what Ivan touched on of that frequent staff involvement in roommate conflict, and we see lots of people at the table addressing roommate conflicts. It's not just the RA going back in. It's not just the area director going back in, but it's going all the way up to Ivan's level as the director of residential life and even all the way up to our VPSA at times. So it's certainly relevant. And like Ivan said, it's becoming increasingly complex. Oftentimes we're now seeing this as a duty incident. So whether it's our student staff or our professional staff, roommate conflict is heightening to a point that we are, documenting it, or we're putting that in as an incident, or looking at policy violations. And so kind of to give a little bit more numbers, last year we had 50 of these duty incidents related to roommate conflicts, and we have 26 so far. That was probably up to a couple weeks ago when we updated this presentation in this academic year. And when we look at our EBI data from last year, there's some information that talks about having a roommate or living on campus and how that's impacted someone's ability to resolve conflict. And so it's good that they have roommates. It's good that these conflicts are happening, but how are we managing them in a way that is helping them grow and is productive?
Another key takeaway, as Tiffani mentioned, is documentation and duty. When I say duty incidents, I'm talking about at that moment, a full-time professional needs to intervene. It cannot wait until the next business day. It has escalated to that level. And almost always, that is the first time a staff member is hearing of this. We do the usual, hey, RA, did you know? It just, as you know, they leave the Post-its or they text each other or Snapchat the messy pile of clothes, and then it just escalates to about 50 incidents. And another important part, I am no longer confident that my intervention in a roommate conflict will stop there, which is where documentation has become critical of roommate issues. You need to gamble that it will go to the vice president. You need to gamble that it will go to legal counsel, to the ombudsperson, to the provost's office. And to have that support of this is what happened, documented, will strengthen your argument as far as we have appropriately intervened and addressed the issue as a residence life and housing team. To go a little bit further into living on campus and roommate issues, I'm sure everyone has heard this at some way, shape, or form. Years ago in How College Affects Students, Pasquale Terenzini stated that living on campus is the single most important determinant of the impact of college. In other words, living on campus is the most important thing a student can do in order to be successful. Have folks heard this before? Okay, I'm seeing some head nods and yeses. And we, as a housing profession, myself included, have been hanging on to this and marketing and advertising and living it. And for most of us, myself included, this is true, right? This is why we do the work we do, is to support students and help them graduate through a living experience, through connections with resident faculty, RAs, programming, case managers in residence halls, etc. Similarly, Aston stated, basically, if you put people together, they eat together, they study together, they live together, they breathe together, they play together, they're going to have a strong likelihood of being engaged. Okay. Over the past 2 years, the narrative has changed, and I'm hoping that this becomes more common in our national conversation. Dr. Parrott did allude to this, and during the Aku Hawaii session, which was on Wednesday, they did allude to this as well. In the most recent edition of How College Affects Students, what the authors have found is that living on campus for first-year students is quite likely associated with experiencing negative psychological outcomes. So basically, by living on campus as opposed to living off campus, you're worse off as far as your mental health goes. That is a significant change in the story we have been telling through peer-reviewed research. To add to that, those stressors, those experiences are exacerbated for students of color or other underrepresented populations through the forms of microaggressions, biased behavior, etc. This is important for us to understand because it has a deep impact on the work that we do. So what changed? There's a reason why this has changed, which I want to briefly cover. First, of course, is diversity, and I mean this in many different ways. Currently, today, approximately 70% of all college students in the United States have at least one characteristic that defines them as non-traditional. The white male 18-year-old college first-year student is no longer the statistical majority. Okay. This, of course, includes all types of institutions of higher learning, for-profits, community colleges, etc. There's also been the diminishment of the residential experience. The proportion of students living on campus has declined. For example, in Miami, at the University of Miami, we have 4,300 students that live on campus. A little further down the ways, Miami-Dade College has over 100,000 students, none of which live on campus. When you put that into proportions, you'll see that the majority of students within our county alone are commuter students and non-traditional. Something else that has changed is technology, and it's easy to stay connected. That Tintonian concept of, in order to be successful in college, you need to say goodbye to your past, you need to disconnect with family, isn't the case. Here I am this morning, my mom is texting me, good luck, love you. That's just a reality, right? We're FaceTiming, we're interacting through social media, through phone calls, etc. So once upon a time, let's say the commuter student was not connected with campus. Now, I remember reading a study that historically commuter students did not study the same way because they didn't have access to the library. I mean, no offense to our librarians, but who needs the library anymore in the sense of needing to physically go when the entire library is online? So regardless of where you live, you now have the same opportunity to access academic resources in many ways. Design has played an important role in this change as well, not just at the college level, at the home level. The majority of today's incoming students have never shared a living space. That was not always the case in the 50s, 60s, etc. When the majority of students, if you've ever shared a bathroom with two mean older sisters, you will know that you learned some skills as far as negotiating shared spaces. So for us, the majority of our incoming students are learning to do this for the first time. In addition to this, our newer residence halls are not conducive towards development. We are amenitizing our spaces over creating developmental spaces. Once upon a time, I worked in a residence hall with 800 singles. Quietest place on campus. Says a lot as far as what the institutional priorities are, but that makes a difference as far as skill development. And lastly, there's a wealth of research on resilience. There has been a decline on the ability to negotiate conflict, to rebound when there has been an issue, regardless of its nature. And we see that as far as impacting the severity of roommate conflict.
So in kind of addressing this, continuing to address the significance of a roommate conflict and that significance that it has on the student, these are some of the negative residential, the results of the residential experience. And to give kind of a fun fact, which I think kind of hits home some of these things, the American College Health Association study did a study in 2012 that found that a negative roommate experience has a more negative effect on the academic performance than binge drinking. And so thinking about how are our college campuses addressing drinking, addressing binge drinking, and what programs do we have in place? What offices do we have in place? And what ways are we really putting forth effort addressing the negative impact of binge drinking? And then how does that compare to, the resources we have in place and the strategies we have in place to address negative residential experiences, negative roommate relationships? And so I think that's, part of the point that Ivan and I are making is that we need to be putting that effort in so that we can manage that negative impacts. And so that takes us right into some of the things that we have been doing. And so some of the strategies we've put in place at UM in the past couple of years to start addressing this negative impact and hopefully working toward resolving it. So we're going to talk about a three-pronged approach that involves bringing awareness, coaching our students, and then intervening. And so we'll go into detail about all of that. So the awareness piece is we designed kind of a marketing campaign. So that's where the title of our presentation comes from, trying to grab students' attention. So yes, roommate agreements are important and we too do them, but how do you get residents to take them seriously? How do you get them to start having these conversations so that when they sit down for their roommate agreement, they're prepared to talk about what's important to them and what the differences may be. And even outside of that, because that conversation needs to continue even beyond that formalized roommate agreement. And so some of the things that we did, the image on the right, they were kind of wall stickers, wall clings. And so they were large. We put them on mirrors in common bathrooms. We put them by elevators. And we had these up when residents moved in the fall. So welcome to college. Welcome to probably your first experience ever sharing a space with someone. These are some things you should start thinking about. So on the right side, it says, have you talked to your roommate today? And then it says sleeping, studying, cleaning, sharing, guests. So these are some things that you should start talking with your roommate about. And then a couple of weeks in, we did this door hanger. And so the front said, "Wanna fight?" hopefully to catch that attention. And then on the back, it said, "Neither do we. Let's schedule a time to fill out your mandatory roommate agreement." And then it goes on to list, until then, discuss these questions with your roommate. Discussing these questions with your roommate can help prevent conflict. So again, we're getting back at some of those concepts. When do you have classes? Are you a morning person or a night person? Things like that, so that they can go ahead and start having that conversation and feel prepared for that roommate agreement. We've done some other marketing things as well. These are things that popped for us in the past year, but just that encouragement to put that time and that energy into creating this as a buzz or as a conversation. We've done some things on social media. We've done some things like on some digital screening on some of these in particular. Today what's going to pop up is about sleep habits, and do you like to sleep with a TV on or with some sort of white noise or things like that. And so we've done some different campaigns like that as well. So the next step is the growth of our roommate agreement. So when I started at a couple years ago, we had a carbon copy, hand-filled out roommate agreement. I'm seeing some head nods. Others have that or have seen that. And so the RA would sit down with the resident, they would fill it out, and then, there would be a couple copies that tore off the back for the residents to hold on to. And this is hard because all of the things that need to be discussed in a roommate agreement, all of the sharing, all of the topics, it's hard to get it to fit on that small sheet of paper. And also, are residents tacking it up, and are they looking at it? Do they feel like it's accessible to them? And so we created an online roommate agreement actually just this past summer. So this is our first year with the online roommate agreement. And so the residents can have access to it, but the idea is that the RA would sit down in this meeting when they're doing the roommate agreement, and they would fill it out, whether, facilitate the conversation and fill out the roommate agreement right there with the residents online. And when they submit it, the residents would then get an email that goes over that roommate agreement. And we just did this roommate agreement through Qualtrics, which is a survey system that we utilize. And the other thing that we did when we created this is we held RAs to a higher expectation that they complete them. So we started using this word like mandatory. All of our first year students need to participate in a roommate agreement when they're sharing a space like this. So I have a little bit of information about this year. We had just under 900 roommate agreements completed. It was optional for our apartment style area. And we didn't have many. We also provided an opportunity, and the survey is conducive to doing it across like a suite. So these two people share a bedroom, but we also share a bathroom. And so does there need to be a mediated conversation amongst all four people about that additional shared space? And we haven't seen a lot of roommate agreements completed across that suite style space, but certainly clearly a lot between the roommates. So the other piece of coaching is roommate mediation. So when there is a conflict, how do we fix it? And so we simultaneously created this online roommate mediation worksheet. So an RA can sit down with the two residents who are having issue, and the survey, again, is kind of a guide for the RA while they're sitting there and they're filling it out right there as they facilitate the conversation. It has ground rules. So the RA, right there in the survey, the RA can read those ground rules and kind of talk about leading up to that conversation. But then it has prompting questions. So what is the issue? What was in the roommate agreement, what did we talk about? How we were going to do this? How were we going to handle the temperature? And then they can talk about then what is the resolution going to be? Additionally, what are we going to do if we continue to have this issue, or if we have an issue about something else? How are we going to communicate with each other, and how are we going to handle that? And my favorite part about the roommate mediation handout or worksheet is that at the very bottom, the RAs check all that apply. What were the issues? And so part of Ivan and I's conversation is, how do we start gaining some data about what are the problems so that we can get a little bit more specific with how we're addressing those kind of proactively. And so the RAs can check, did you discuss sleeping? Did you discuss guests? Did you discuss sharing things? And so I pulled some of that information from this academic year. We've had 17 roommate mediation worksheets completed this year, which isn't a lot. And I think in our first year, it's really, I would guess that the RAs are having more conversations than 17 total across our campus. But they're not quite, the conversations are happening casually. I don't think they're quite at a place where they feel like they want to do this formally. So it's going to, I think, take some time to get them on board with doing this all the time so that we can gain that data. But the heavy hitters of what we discussed were sleep, guests and visitation, and cleanliness. Certainly many other things, but that was it. I want to be able to sleep in my room. I want to have control over who's coming in and out of my space and what time they're coming in and out of my space. And we disagree generally on how to keep this room clean, or how it's a small space. So how do we want it to look, and how do we want to interact in that space? So the last piece that we'll talk about is intervention.
The next part, as it relates to intervention, has to do with policy. Frankly, I hit a point when I was fed up with having to spend so much time with roommate issues and seeing the staff, including RAs, really be consumed by this. And so one of the facts I've really been waving on a flag and my print in tapestry is referring to that study from the American College Health Association, that the effects of a negative roommate relationship on academics has a more negative impact than that of binge drinking. Think about your policies and procedures as it relates to alcohol on your campus. Like most campuses, I'm sure you have policies in writing, you have conduct meetings, you have crisis protocol, you have training. Does your roommate mediation, marketing, intervention policies and practices act at that level, at that same level? And that's the metaphor I use is we need to hit intoxication levels that came out wrong. As it relates to training, policies, protocol, we need to be at the same level as sophistication as it relates to alcohol and drugs. So I said, we're going to turn this into policy. We need to put our foot down. We are a private institution. We do live in a world at our institution, I'm sure it's the same at many others, that we live with a consumer mentality. Our students, our parents are paying close to $50,000 a year, and that is just in tuition. There's a lot more that goes into room and board. There is an expectation that you will have a pleasant experience living on campus. At no point in time have I, the president, the vice president, ever delivered the promise that you will have a pleasant experience living here. It's college, it's life. There will be ups and downs. There's only so much we can do. So I said, I'm putting my foot down, and we're going to put some things in writing in our policies. And this is our policy. This is part of our policy because we need to create a framework to which to operate. It's not fair for the RAs, for the area directors to have to scramble every time to make things work. I needed to provide them a framework and communicate to parents, to students, to know if you have a roommate issue, here's what you're entitled to, here's what you're not, and here's how we're going to respond. Same thing we do with intoxication, skateboarding down the hallway. We have policies, and it's in there. Students are expected to live by this. I think it's so important. I would like to read our preamble, if you will, our roommate preamble. In full support of the educational mission of the university, students living on campus are expected to view academic responsibilities as their primary goal. Therefore, the purpose of a student's room is primarily for study and sleep, which takes precedence over social privileges. Residents are expected to facilitate this environment for others around them. Each resident should also take responsibility for communicating concerns in a timely and productive manner to their roommates, an RA, or other staff members so that concerns can be addressed. There are some bold statements here that I want to highlight. The purpose of your room is study and sleep. We made a decision that this is what rooms are for. And if there's a roommate mediation, we're going to pick. So we have essentially moved from mediation to refereeing. We're going to make some decisions if we have to. We don't want to go there, but there has to be some sort of safety net for my team to make some decisions that they have to. So we said, you know what? The purpose of this room is study and sleep. Guest visitors, late night music, those things, sorry. If it's become an issue, it can't happen. The other thing we did is that you're expected to do this for others around them. So this goes beyond just your room, but also your neighbors above and below. I'll never forget the resident who had a subwoofer about the size of me, and his roommate was cool with it, but just people 2 floors down, including faculty, were not cool with it. The other thing is you are responsible for communicating your concerns. If you come to me 2 months later and everything blows up, you have failed according to our policies. So you're not getting the same treatment as if you come to us from the get. And I push back on students and parents about that. If you have an issue, let us know about it. Our vice president loves to say, there's no problem we can't solve so long as we know about it. This is this, and we're expecting you to address it. These are the rights. We decided to print out and publish the rights. This is what every student who shares a space is entitled to. You have the right to feel safe from harm. And the term harm was intentional. Because every time there's a roommate issue, they come in my office and say, I'm not safe. I don't feel safe. Because your roommate sleeps with a light on. So the term harm was very intentional. And we mean that in the true form of the word. You have the right to an environment conducive to sleep. You have the right to study in your room free of unreasonable noise and distractions. But I like to watch TV. Put on a headset. We are making some decisions as far as who gets priority as far as behaviors go. Did you have a question in the back? Okay. You have the right to a clean and well-maintained space. We just finished health and safety inspections. We have some fungal concerns that we need to address when we get back, just because the suites is a weak spot that we need to address. Me and my room, we're okay with this, and we have our cleanliness standards, and they over there have theirs. So that's an area that we need to address, because that's kind of the no man's land, and bathrooms are critical because we do not clean them in some of our residential areas. So that is a weakness I think we have at this point. You have the right to privacy and respect for your space and belongings. The reason I wanted this in there was because of social media. When you're posting your roommate's mess or screenshotting what they texted you and posting it online, you're struck out if you do that. I think you violated a right there by posting someone almost always without their consent. And then lastly, you have the right to communicate and resolve your grievances. So those are our policies. This is also in there. And this is our procedure. If the previous slide was what our policies and expectations are, this is our procedure. Again, a bit lengthy, but I think it warrants reading. Upon moving into a new space with a roommate, every resident will have the opportunity to initiate the completion of a roommate agreement with the RA. Once set, the agreement will be like any other policy or expectation, but does not supersede HRL policies or rights and responsibilities. Please put that in there if you're updating policies, because they'll get creative. You can work with your RA to address concerns and revise this agreement at any time throughout the year. We recognize that you get started, oh my gosh, yes, bring your guests anytime, this place is going to be awesome, and then midterms hit, and you realize that's not cool anymore. So we want to be sure that they have the opportunity to revisit this as the year goes on. We have steps for addressing concerns. If they come to me, I kick them out, at least virtually, and say, you got to talk to your roommate. Simple question, did you talk to your roommate about this? Well, no, but you got to start there. So first step is to communicate with your roommate. You got to talk to your RA. If that doesn't work out, you have to participate in a mediated meeting. You have to attend to your agreement and set guidelines. So basically, here's how we're going to move forward. And if needed, you could utilize professional staff. This is an important part, and I think has been a difference for us with accountability. At any point, a resident can reach out to the area director. If a conflict is unable to be resolved, an area director will step in to address concerns. And this is what I mentioned. We have moved mildly from mediation to refereeing at some times. This can result in continued mediation. We got to have another follow-up conversation about what happened. Policy violations, we're going to address this and adjudicate it. Or if needed, an administrative room change. You've been violating this. I'm moving you. You're out. And that's something we did not do prior. Again, this is a last resort. But if we find that someone has been violating the roommate rights and responsibilities or has not been holding up their end of the bargain of the agreement, you've lost your privilege to live in that space and you're moving. I do wish I had an excessive room changing policy, but maybe next year.
Before kind of moving on, I just want to speak, previously was an area director, and just want to speak to the impact that having this policy had on my ability to manage those roommate conflicts. When you're sitting down and this person, they want to use the space to watch TV until XYZ hour, and this person wants to use the space to sleep or study, I was in a place as an area director to say, it's both of your space. And we didn't have, we can have some common sense conversation, but we will have students and sometimes their parents who would push back and say, that's what they want to do in the space and that's up to them. My student or I go study in the library, and when I come back to my room, this is relaxed time. This is time for me to watch TV. And the policy really provided me in that time as an area director the opportunity to say, No, we have made a decision. We've offered this information to you. It's very clear. And this is how we're going to kind of move forward with how the space should be used. And do it in an unbiased way so that you're not in a place as a professional where you're choosing sides for these residents, but that you have the tools to be able to enforce what we know is important for them in those spaces. And so the next thing to talk about is the role of assignments. And so kind of going back to the case study that Ivan shared at the beginning of our conversation, whether or not we're allowing students to choose their roommate and what kind of goes into that. So wanted to share a little bit about what we do. So students, when they sign up for housing, they can fill out a survey that asks some different questions. And so these are the questions that is asked on that survey. Some examples, your study habits. Do you like your room organized? What time do you go to sleep? And so the questions, they check a box if they want to be included in a search. So they choose a screen name, they provide some sort of description of themselves, and then they're paired or they're matched or they're given a list of people who are compatible based on the answers of these questions. And then they can go forward and initiate meeting that person or deciding if they want to pair together. But of course, additionally, if they just know someone they want to room with and they've never filled this out, they can choose that person as well. And so I think kind of with this information, it's not just for us up to residential life. It's not just up to us to say this is how we're managing roommate conflict. Really, it starts at the very beginning with how these students are being assigned and continues with assignments regarding room changes. We do have an open room change policy. So at any point in time, someone wants to say, no, I don't want to do a roommate mediation. I don't want to have a conversation with my roommate. They are welcome to go to the housing office and change rooms right then in that moment. And so there are implications with working with assignments and what those policies are when you're talking about managing these conflicts. And so I think going into that, the next part of our conversation is kind of the what's next or...
One note about assessment, actually two, maybe more. This backfires sometimes, right? You assigned me based on what I filled out. You did this to me by putting me in this space. Get him out of my space. So moving forward, I plan on working with the assignments team to clarify what we do with this, as far as this is not a guarantee, right? When students fill this out, they are still in high school. They're filling this out right now. As we speak, accepted students are filling this out. We are asking them, when they have spent their entire academic life.
Sometimes it's their parents that's filling it out too.
Correct. So it's true. Parents fill it out. Actually, story for another time about substance-free housing and how often parents sign up students for that. But when students fill this out, they have been going to school in the traditional sense their entire academic lives. August rolls around and I can go to sleep whenever I want. I could watch whatever I want. Life changes by the time they fill it out. So I think there need to be some disclaimers. And also, our housing application rate has changed. The admissions office is accepting more students. We're accepting more transfer students. More students are choosing to live on campus. We can't produce more beds overnight. So there becomes a time, and we make it very clear, if you apply after the deadline, we're just finding you a space at that point. And I think we need to do a better job communicating when we say, at this point, we're just finding you a bed. Okay. Something else, as Tiffani mentioned, we do have an open room change policy. Anytime you want to move, you don't have to tell us why, go ahead. However, I'll get to 1 second. However, starting this past year, we achieved 100% occupancy. The mentality before them is, you got a problem, go ahead and move. Those days are gone. The inn is full, which has made mediating roommate issues even more important, because having that in our back pocket, that option is gone. There's a question in the back or comment.
Sorry, you kind of answered it, but I feel like it's still important. My question was, we also have an open room change policy, and so I like love the idea of this, but my fear is that like 99% of the time they just end up moving anyways. So doesn't it like feel like kind of a waste of like all your time? Does that make sense? But now that I know that you have 100% occupancy, which we will next year, I see the point in that. But it just sucks when you put so much like time and effort and energy into something like this, and then they're just like, well, I'm just gonna move anyways. But I see the like validity in having this process, because it is really kind of like muddy waters.
So to kind of answer for you why we do it at my university is we've been explaining to them, and it's been pretty effective this year, is so you have this roommate. You don't really like them, you're strangers, you were friends at one point, whatever. If you can't negotiate that conflict with them, how are you going to negotiate that with somebody you love, somebody that you marry, that you are committed to? So we want you to understand how to deal with somebody who you don't care about, so that when the time comes with that person you do care about, you know how to confront them appropriately, and you can have those disagreements and arguments and it doesn't end everything. And it's actually worked a lot better than we anticipated.
Or even like when students are like, well, I'm just going to move off campus. And I'm like, well, your leasing office isn't going to help you mediate a roommate conflict. So I always say that because just ridiculous.
Probably worth noting, again, I wish we had an excessive room changing policy, but before you move, an area director has to sign off on your move. So if we have students and they're on our radar, we all know who they are, who's filling out another room change form, no. We're not passing along a problem to another room, to another RA. So that's something important. I should probably mention we have these policies on what happens if they're violated. We talked about administrative room change. On occasion, we have some pretty egregious and extreme violations of roommate policies. We have the ability to, or I have the ability to conduct what's called a housing review, essentially to review the case for termination. And that's something I would advocate for. Again, not something I like to do, but there's some people who are just not good for our community. And perhaps living off campus is good because you're affecting the roommate rights and responsibilities of others. So what's next? I mentioned some of our weak points, the shared bathrooms that are unmonitored as far as daily housekeeping is important. And as time progresses, I'm no longer believing in this concept that our upperclassmen students no longer need as much support either programmatically or with roommate issues. The first year residential areas, those are easy spaces. Bed, desk. That's it. Our upperclassmen areas have washers, dryers, kitchens, living rooms. It's more complicated. So I'm starting to think that perhaps this is something that needs to be required for our upperclassmen, just because there's more space, there's more opportunity for issues to arise. Up until this point, most of what we have discussed are residential life efforts. We are one department. However, within our department, we have kind of two org charts. What's next is assessment and working more closely with our assignments coordinators, because currently we don't have information as to why people are moving. There may be good reasons. You know what? I made friends with someone and she has a space available. I want to go move there. Fine. Okay. We don't know from an assignment side, we don't really ask why you're moving. So that's something I want to get into our paperwork and just ask that one question, provide some options, and just check issues with roommate, whatever it may be. Something else we want to look at is roommate matching working. The surveys that we provide, and again, we mentioned some of those limitations, such as parents filling it out, the time they filling it out. Is it really making a difference? I'm sure as many of us know, some of our friends would not make the best roommates. So I want to look more into these questions. And if some of them are just not working, then perhaps we need to change the questions we ask. Because we have, as long as I have been there, we have never changed those questions. It's just been like that. I'll give you an easy example. Smoking. Yes or no? Good question to ask, right? Today, smoking isn't as the issue that it was back in the day. The issue is vaping. And that has become a source of roommate issues. But that's not smoking, is it? So these are some things that we need to work on with our assignments team to update these questions. Again, I want to compare some information from our first year students versus continuing students and what is causing what's the point of contention? Is it guests? Is it noise? Is it cleanliness? I want to kind of codify what are the sources of the issues. As we know, it's not the issue really, it's the communication that is associated with the issue that causes the roommate conflict. And then lastly, we want to figure out, are these issues with random roommates or are they with roommates you chose or your parents chose?
Something to add about assessment is doing those online roommate mediation forms and the online roommate agreements. There are functional benefits to that, but I was just able to share with you, by the RA, check all that apply. What are the issues you discussed? Now we have this rich, real information about what are the key issues that are causing people to have an argument or need a roommate mediation. And kind of what Ivan is sharing is that regarding the assignments, regarding the actual room change, so the conflict that ends up with a room change, we don't have the data there. And so that is something that we see as a gap and something that we want to have so that we can handle the issues proactively as well once we know kind of what the trends are and what's going on. And so we want to open it up for questions and discussion, but I think that is one question that I would pose to the group is, does anyone have that? Does anyone have like an exit, a room change, survey that collects that information or anything like that? I see a lot of head nodding or shaking. I'm sorry. So it doesn't seem like anyone does have that. But other questions for us or things to share?
One thing that I was writing down my questions as you were going. One thing that I really struggle with in my building right now, it's a suite style. So it's either 4 singles and they share a living room and 2 bathrooms, or 2 singles and then a double room, and that harbors like a lot of roommate conflicts between the suite mates or the roommates, and I just can't get them to fill their roommate agreement out, even though it's technically like mandatory. Like we'll go in on health and safeties and see it laying there blank, or only 2 of them have signed it, 3 of them have signed it. So how do you mandate, or what is the setup for getting RAs to fill out their roommate agreements?
I don't know if others have ideas. I will share that for us. And this is something that is kind of happening even outside of the roommate conversation. But that kind of training and coaching the RAs that this is your job and you're going to do it with every resident. And so putting that onus on the RA to do it, we're having a separate conversation about those one-on-one interactions. So we can't just plan big programs. We've got to know the residents. We've got to spend that time with them one-on-one, or 1-on-4 in an apartment or something like that. And so this is a tool. We kind of sell it as a tool. Like, this is a way for you to have an excuse to go in and have that conversation, and you don't have to make small talk and things like that. Here's something that you can talk about. So we kind of try to sell it as a tool, but it's the mandatory is that it's mandatory that the RAs are doing it with all the residents. I don't know if others have.
Money. And I know we're on the same spot. I don't really have money. I can't spend it. Go back to, we spend a lot of money on safe spring break, alcohol education. How many of y'all have a budget to address roommate issues? Nobody. So incentivize it. Spend money. I saw some amazing models for residential curricula or residential experiences that talk a lot about building community, etc. Spend money on it. Put this as part of this because it's important and it doesn't have to be much. Whether it's incentivizing the RAs with a cool hoodie sweater, whether it's entering a drawing for an Apple Watch, $500 for an Apple. I don't know how much an Apple Watch costs. Let's say it costs $500. Something tells me it doesn't. Can incentivize people. So I'm just saying that I think that needs to be part of it because that was a conscious decision to spend money on a consultant to come and help us with marketing as far as the decals and what's possible, what's not, because this is important to us and warrants some funding.
Others have thoughts or additions to the question or another question? Right over here.
So I don't think you'll have said it out loud, but like the incentivizing, the asking for help, not wanting to talk, how exactly did Gen Z and thinking about this generation that is coming to college factor into these changes you've made?
I mean, I think it does. I think that those kind of generational changes certainly do. We're starting to have conversation about Gen Z coming to college and how that has an impact. And I can't say that we fed it directly into some of the changes that we've made, but I do think seeing those changes in the trends of what they're responding to and what interactions they want. I mean, I think one big thing about Gen Z is they're being more thoughtful about their social media use and how they're utilizing technology. And so maybe there's this kind of swing back to wanting those interpersonal interactions a bit more. So I don't know if
Frankly, we didn't have any conversations. This is exactly how we're going to target this generation. But I think this warrants mentioning. Last academic year, we had about 600 residential programs. That includes us being closed for 3 weeks and having no programs for the remainder of the fall semester due to Hurricane Irma. That's a lot. So for this year, having relationships is the foundation of a successful residential experience. Those first 6 weeks, we're not doing a lot of programming anymore. We cut a lot of that out because for the RAs, your focus is getting to know your residents and doing roommate mediations. That's your program. Yeah, we have a Labor Day barbecue and a football watch party, which is pretty easy to do. But historically, we changed to program the first 6 weeks to relationships. So that, I think, also has helped us because priority number one for the next month and a half, relationships.
other questions.
So how are you still handling the parents that are calling completely? They skip everyone in your office and go straight to the president and are like, you have to move my child now. Are you still going back to this is our policy, or are you accommodating the parent?
You want to speak on?
I get most of those calls. I send it back to the RA and the area director. I do. I got the email from the president isn't going to spend time on this. We have a relatively new president. The previous one probably would have, but our current president doesn't even say anything. The office just forwards it straight. So our vice president, who I love as a mentor, loves to help people and will start getting there. And thankfully, I have a relationship to say, stop, I got this. And that's where I go, push, but what about? I get it. They get upset. They call up. But for this to work, I need the process to have a chance, at least. If it doesn't work and needs to be escalated, fine, but it's going to start there. On occasion, perhaps there's a severe issue of which we'll address, but I push it back.
I'll say also, as having been an area director who then the phone call trickles back down to me and the parent wants to have a conversation, it's about getting the student in. And sometimes that can be really difficult. That's something that I've experienced in particular at UM is the student doesn't want to come in. The parent doesn't want to push the student to come in. They want it to be resolved based on their phone call, and really being able to lean on our director and our vice president who knows kind of what we're doing, even as an area director, to say, then I'm sorry, I can't help. They're welcome to go get a room change, but I need to be able to speak with your student in person or over the phone if they can't come in right now in this moment, to start having this conversation. It'll have my full attention, and I'm here and I'm happy to help, but I've got to speak with the student about the matter. And so some people who don't have that open room change policy, maybe it's a little bit harder for you to say, well, if you don't want to come speak to me, then go do this. But I feel like I had the support as an area director to be able to push back and say, I need to talk with the student.
Important to note, parents cannot participate in this process. We have parents who reach out to their son or daughter's roommate or to their parents, or who fly in because they want to participate.
Or they want to be on FaceTime.
Not possible.
My question, I have all continuing students, apartment style. They have their washers and dryers, more things, more problems, as I've said and found out. One of the things that we've noticed, though, is that when continuing students get to choose who they're living with, it's their best friend, it's their friend from home, whatever it might be, there seems to not only be a roommate conflict, but an interpersonal conflict or a friendship conflict. And I think where I've had a hard time of navigating, and I'm interested to hear kind of how you have all navigated it, is I can solve the music on too loud, the guests coming over and things like that. But when it's deep-rooted interpersonal conflict, I don't think that myself or my RAs are even the ones that are equipped to handle that type of conversation, because it's far above the things that we kind of really have control over. And so kind of what have you all done anything, or you all have any ideas about where you might go in situations similar to that?
Yes. So what I've talked with RAs about is what's a roommate conflict and what's a friend fight. And we're not in the business of mediating friend fights. I think something that is helpful to display that, because obviously, I mean, we don't necessarily say that to the residents, but what's helpful in displaying that is that roommate mediation form. You're asking those questions. So, hey, here's a list of things. What of these things are you having issue with? Oh, just, maybe it's communication. So can we get at it in that way? Can we talk about how you're communicating with each other, the passive aggressive notes you're leaving and things like that? But yes, I mean, I think that's part of the training piece. So something that we didn't even talk about was adding that conflict mediation and that conflict management training more to our RA training, so that they feel like they know the difference, and talking to the RAs about that. What's a roommate mediation need, and what is kind of a friend fight, and how do you still support them through that? As their support, how do you still support them through figuring that out, and what does that look like for them living together or not? But how do we not get ourselves in the middle of, she didn't invite me to dinner last week and so on and so forth, because it's just, frankly, it's not our job, and there's we don't have a quick fix to that. We have no way to resolve it. So I don't know if others have thoughts about how maybe how you mediate those friend fights, or how you train staff to avoid them, or anything like that. Your thoughts? Okay. Other questions? Things to share? Yeah.
I think with the Gen Z aspect of it, I think we also have to keep in mind that some of our grad students are actually part of that Gen Z generation, and we've kind of worked with them already. And I think having that intervention part, or the policy of communication on social media, because they're so used to like always putting everything on Snapchat, and that's kind of like their passive aggressive post-it notes. I think having that and addressing it is very important.
Snapchat as passive aggressive post-it notes. I love that. That's really good. I think we have time for one quick question. If not, we can stick around towards the end. I saw people taking photos. I hope you got my good side. I assume you would like a copy of this. Just drop off your card, or I can scribble your contact, and Tiffany will email it to you.
Yep. As well as any of our materials, if you want to get that as well. Thank you all. Just a reminder to fill out the program evaluation. But we appreciate y'all joining us this morning. Thank you.